Elvis wanted to marry me, but my mother wouldn't hear of it.
What if I told you that even Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, once faced a heartbreak he could never truly forget? At the height of his fame, Elvis fell deeply in love with a stunning Hollywood actress, convinced she was the one he wanted to marry. But decades later, at the age of 92, she finally revealed why she rejected him. And the truth is more shocking than anyone imagined. Her decision wasn't about turning down a superstar or resisting the glitter of fame. It was because her heart already belonged to someone else, a secret love story that Elvis could never compete with. The rejection wounded him so deeply that he later married a woman who looked uncannily like her, almost as if he was chasing the ghost of what he had lost. This is the untold story of Debra Paget, the Hollywood starlet who broke Elvis Presley's heart and made a choice that forever changed the course of his life. Deborah Lee Griffin, born in 1933, entered the world with a path towards stardom, seemingly preordained by her mother, a former actress who was determined to see her daughter succeed in show business. From an early age, Deborah's life was shaped by her mother's ambitions, which meant that she was introduced to the world of performance and the rigors of Hollywood long before most children could even comprehend them. Her upbringing was infused with the demands of auditions, coaching, and the constant pursuit of roles, leaving little room for a typical childhood. By the age of 14, her dedication, or perhaps the result of her mother's relentless guidance, led her to sign a contract with 20th Century Fox, marking the official beginning of her professional career. This was a remarkable achievement for someone so young, and it immediately placed her in the competitive and often unforgiving environment of Hollywood. She was thrust into a world where studio executives, directors, and co-stars were seasoned professionals, and where a single role could determine the trajectory of her future. Her first significant film role came in 1948 with Cry of the City. At just 14 years old, she faced the daunting challenge of performing opposite adult actors in a story filled with complex emotional and dramatic content. One of the most memorable and controversial moments of her debut was her first on-screen kiss with her much older co-star. This scene, which would have been considered provocative given her age, highlighted both her precocious talent and the pressures young actresses faced in Hollywood at the time. It was a moment that underscored the difficult balance between childhood innocence and the adult expectations placed upon her by the film industry. Despite her youth, she managed to navigate these challenges with a professionalism that hinted at the depth of her potential, setting the stage for a career that would soon capture public attention. Her early experiences, shaped by a determined mother in a demanding studio system, not only introduced her to fame, but also instilled in her a resilience and poise that would become hallmarks of her career. These formative years, marked by intense scrutiny and early exposure to adult situations, played a crucial role in shaping the actress she was destined to become. In the 1950s, Deborah's career truly began to take off as she became widely recognized for her striking and unusual appearance, which Hollywood studios quickly labeled as exotic. This distinctive look opened doors to a range of roles, but it also came with a heavy price. Studios often cast her in parts that emphasized her difference from the typical leading lady, frequently requiring her to play characters of various ethnic backgrounds, regardless of historical or cultural accuracy. These roles reflected both the industry's fascination with her beauty and the pervasive racial insensitivity of the time. One of her most significant early roles came in 1950 with Broken Arrow, a Western film in which she played a young Native American maiden opposite James Stewart, who was then 42 years old. Deborah was only 16 at the time, making the on-screen pairing highly controversial even by the standards of the era. The film emphasized her character's innocence and youth, creating a striking and unsettling contrast with her much older co-star. The age disparity, coupled with the film's narrative, drew attention to Hollywood's willingness to place very young actresses in roles with romantic or sensual undertones, a practice that would later generate criticism for its ethical implications. To convincingly portray these ethnically coded roles, Deborah was subjected to physically uncomfortable transformations. She was required to darken her skin and wear brown contact lenses that often impaired her vision and caused considerable discomfort. These demands exemplified the extremes that actresses of the time endured in order to meet the rigid and often problematic standards of studio casting. Despite these challenges, she delivered performances that were both convincing and compelling, demonstrating her professionalism and determination at a young age. Her career reached a pinnacle in 1956 with two major films that would cement her place in Hollywood history. The first, Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, gave her a role in an epic of monumental scale, showcasing her ability to hold her own amidst a vast ensemble cast and spectacular production. That same year, she starred in Love Me Tender alongside Elvis Presley, a film that not only brought her into the orbit of one of the era's most iconic figures, but also exposed her to a new generation of fans. Both films were critical and commercial successes, solidifying her reputation as a talented and versatile actress who could navigate the demands of both epic historical dramas and contemporary popular entertainment. Her trajectory in the 1950s thus combined extraordinary opportunity with intense scrutiny and physical strain, reflecting both the glamour and the darker realities of Hollywood stardom. She became a figure who symbolized the tensions of the era, celebrated for her beauty and talent, yet shaped by the industry's sometimes exploitative practices. Despite her success and the recognition she gained on screen, Debra's time in Hollywood was far from glamorous. Behind the spotlight, she often felt weighed down by personal struggles that slowly drained her passion for acting. Many of her roles placed her in predictable stereotypes, most often as the damsel in distress. While audiences admired her beauty and presence, she longed for deeper, more meaningful characters that could truly challenge her as an actress. Instead, the repetition left her frustrated with a lingering sense that her talent was being overlooked. Another burden she carried was the way the industry shaped her image at a young age. She later admitted to feeling disturbed when she discovered that many teenagers saw her as a pinup figure. The realization that her carefully crafted screen persona was being consumed in such an objectifying way deeply unsettled her. It only reinforced her belief that Hollywood valued her more as a fantasy than as a genuine person or artist. When she stepped away from acting, Debra found a new direction in life. She experienced a profound spiritual awakening and became a devoted Christian, eventually sharing her faith as a host on the Trinity Broadcasting Network, TBN. This chapter of her life allowed her to connect with people on a much deeper level, away from the relentless scrutiny of fame. For Debra, the transition from Hollywood starlet to a woman of faith symbolized resilience, self-discovery, and the pursuit of authenticity in a world that often demanded otherwise. Debra's relationship with Howard Hughes stands as one of the most sensational and closely scrutinized chapters of her life, emblematic of the often blurred lines between power, wealth, and personal entanglement in Golden Age Hollywood. Hughes, already notorious for his eccentricity, immense wealth, and exacting control over his business and personal life, reportedly took a particular interest in Debra during the height of her early career. The relationship was both glamorous and precarious, placing her in the orbit of one of the most powerful and unpredictable men in America. Sources suggest that Hughes's fascination with Debra went beyond the typical patronage common in Hollywood at the time. He lavished her with extravagant gifts, creating an image of romantic allure and material indulgence. Yet this generosity came with implicit strings. Hughes's controlling tendencies reportedly extended to her professional life. He had the authority to influence casting decisions, production priorities, and even studio publicity, and his favor or disfavor could make or break a rising star. Debra, still in her teens and navigating the pressures of fame, was caught between the opportunity for career advancement and the personal complexities of being linked to such a dominant figure. Her involvement with Hughes also intersected dramatically with her personal life and romantic prospects. One of the most notable consequences was her decision to turn down a proposal from Elvis Presley, who was smitten with her after their work together on Love Me Tender. Reports indicate that her relationship with Hughes, combined with her parents' objections, played a central role in this choice. The decision underscored the complicated dynamics she faced balancing youthful attraction, parental influence, and the career implications of entanglement with a man like Hughes. It is widely believed that Hughes's presence in her life may have limited her romantic freedom while simultaneously offering her opportunities and protection in an industry notorious for exploitation. Being involved with Howard Hughes placed Debra at the intersection of power, celebrity, and scandal. The relationship was emblematic of Hollywood's darker undercurrents, the intense scrutiny faced by young actresses, the ways wealth and influence could manipulate careers, and the personal sacrifices demanded to maintain success in an unforgiving studio system. For Debra, it was a period of both fascination and tension, illustrating how the allure of glamour often came bundled with constraints that were as psychologically taxing as they were publicly invisible. Beyond the controversy of the pinup photos that deeply troubled her, Debra Paget's early career was shaped in ways that today would raise serious ethical concerns. Under the Hollywood studio system, her image was carefully designed to balance between innocence and sensuality, a duality that both boosted her popularity and stirred criticism. This wasn't accidental, but a deliberate theme woven into her roles. For example, in Broken Arrow, her character Morningstar was portrayed with a focus on her youthful beauty, creating a dynamic where she was admired not only by the much older leading man, James Stewart, but also by the audience. The troubling aspect wasn't explicit content, but the way the narrative placed a young woman on the edge of adulthood into situations where her desirability was emphasized, often opposite men far older than her. This pattern continued throughout her early work. From her very first appearance at 14, Paget was repeatedly cast in roles where her characters were objects of attraction for men significantly older. The studios, and by extension, the cultural standards of that era, benefited from presenting her as an exotic fantasy figure, even while she was still legally under her mother's guardianship on set. For Paget, this created a painful inner struggle. She longed for strong, meaningful roles like those given to Marilyn Monroe, yet she was continually confined to playing the beautiful but passive damsel, a figure designed more to decorate the screen than to drive the story. This professional commodification of her youth and sexuality seemingly bled into her personal life, which became a subject of public fascination and whispered speculation. Her series of short-lived marriages, first to singer David Street in 1958, lasting a mere 3 months, then to director Bud Bodisher in 1960, ending after just 22 days, and finally to Ling Kung, a descendant of Confucius, with whom she had a son before divorcing in 1980, painted a public picture of romantic instability. To contemporary observers, these rapid failed unions suggested a frantic search for an anchor, a stability that was desperately lacking in her controlled and exploitative professional world. The intense pressure of fame, coupled with the psychological impact of being a product since childhood, often leaves individuals ill-equipped to form lasting, healthy personal relationships. And Paget's marital history seems to reflect this common tragedy of child stars. Furthermore, in the ruthlessly strategic environment of studio-era Hollywood, it was widely understood that relationships were rarely just romantic. Alliances with powerful figures, whether producers, directors, or well-connected individuals, could offer a lifeline, better roles, positive publicity, or protection from the whims of studio heads. Her relationship with the powerful and notoriously womanizing billionaire Howard Hughes, which she publicly acknowledged, fits this pattern. While her feelings were likely genuine, such a connection with one of the most influential men in aviation and film was also a strategic asset, a fact not lost on industry gossips. Similarly, a marriage to a respected director like Boddicker could have been seen as a potential career move, a way to transition into more serious roles under a husband's guidance. Her final marriage to Ling Kung represented a clean and final break from Hollywood altogether, a retreat into a completely different world of private business and ultimately faith. Thus, her love life can be interpreted not just as a series of romantic failures, but as a navigating path through the treacherous waters of fame, a search for love certainly, but also for security, career advancement, and finally a complete escape from the industry that had defined and confined her since she was a child. Debra Paget's decision to decline Elvis Presley's marriage proposal was far more than a simple romantic rejection. It became a pivotal piece of Hollywood lore, generating waves of gossip and speculation that rippled through the industry and continue to fascinate fans decades later. The intrigue stemmed from a perfect storm of factors: the towering stature of the suitor, the unconventional reasons for the refusal, and the uncanny, almost surreal consequence that followed. At the heart of the story was the undeniable authenticity of Presley's interest. By 1956, Elvis was not just a rising star, he was a cultural atom bomb, a figure for whom adulation was a constant. For him to become genuinely infatuated with his co-star to the point of proposing marriage signaled a profound and serious attraction. He wasn't merely pursuing another Hollywood starlet. He saw in Paget, as the transcript notes, the most beautiful girl he had ever seen, and his visits to her parents' home demonstrated a traditional and earnest courtship. This made her rejection not just a personal slight, but a stunning defiance of the predictable narrative that any woman would be thrilled to be chosen by the king. The reasons behind her refusal became prime fodder for the Hollywood rumor mill. Paget's own explanation, that she obeyed her parents' objections, was a quaint, almost anachronistic concept in the rebellious spirit of rock and roll, making it seem like a cover for a more complex truth. This truth, as historians and gossip alike quickly seized upon, was her simultaneous involvement with the reclusive billionaire and legendary Hollywood wolf, Howard Hughes. To choose Hughes over Presley was a breathtaking power move. It was a choice of old-world enigmatic power and immense wealth, Hughes over new-world explosive fame and heartthrob status, Presley. This framed Paget not as a passive ingenue, but as a woman with calculated, if not controversial, ambitions, making the story infinitely more spicy than a simple no. However, the most lasting and eerily poetic layer of this intrigue was the physical resemblance between Debra Paget and Priscilla Beaulieu, the young woman Elvis would meet in Germany just a few years later and eventually marry. The similarity was not subtle. Both possessed the same dark sculpted eyebrows, the same pale complexion contrasted with jet black hair, the same delicate features and exotic aura. Paget herself acknowledged the bizarre coincidence, remarking that they could have been twins. This created a compelling and somewhat unsettling psychological narrative that Elvis, heartbroken by his inability to win Paget, sought out and molded a look-alike. It transformed a simple romantic disappointment into a deep-seated obsession, feeding into the mythos of Elvis's loneliness and his desire for a pure, almost idealized woman he could protect and shape. The gossip columns and fan magazines thrived on this almost soap opera-level intrigue, painting a picture of a love story denied by circumstance only to be replaced by a living echo. This narrative cemented Debra Paget's place not just as a star in her own right, but as a crucial what-if in the tragedy of Elvis Presley's life, a ghost of a choice that forever altered the course of his personal history.